Hello and welcome back to You're Better Than That, a podcast hosted by me, Hannah Miller, and my friends. And today's episode is the first day of spring. Hello and welcome spring. And welcome Zoe.
Hi spring.
I'm wearing my spring outfit, ready for spring. It's the 20th of March today, I think. Mm-hmm. And sometimes spring is the 21st or the 22nd, but I've checked. First day of spring today. So if you're listening to this on the 20th of March, welcome to spring. We are so glad to see you. I love spring.
I do love spring.
I really do. I love the bunnies. I love the chocolate. I love the sunny, the longer sunlight.
The flowers coming out.
The flowers. Hope appears on the earth. I love it.
Everyone's
I love
happy.
it. You find yourself in the morning like sun watching, the sun's out, the sun's out. Well, at least the light's there. And I just love it. And we thought we could talk a little bit about new season, spring. Spring is a time of change. Spring is a time of growth. It's a fresh start. It's a new beginnings kind of time. And contrast to that, lots of people had new beginnings in January, which, by the way, data tells us that by now, only 13% of New Year's resolutions are still going.
Wow. That's really low.
Nearly 90% are done for.
Gosh.
It's quite depressing. I think even by the end of Jan, it's pretty low stats. But by now, you're pretty much done. Did you make any?
You know what? I normally do, but this year I didn't.
So you're doing fine then?
Yeah. I mean, I made like general statements, but nothing
too specific.
Yeah, exactly. How about you?
Yeah, I didn't make them specific either. I more thought about direction of travel over the year.
Yes.
The problem is I'm not sure I can track exactly how well I've done.
That's the tricky part.
That's the thing. And if you were somebody who did one and said you were going to lose weight, get fit, read more, drink more water, whatever it might be, most of the people who were going to do that have failed. And one of the reasons people fail apparently is because so as I've read, human nature is designed more for little changes or things that we can like add a change and build upon it. One of the most successful books of this last decade is Atomic Habits, which is all about little changes and building from one thing to another. And if we get those changes embedded, then you can add another thing to it. I think added to that, thinking about fresh starts. I might have said this on a podcast already, but I think it's worth repeating. I read somewhere somebody said we put too much pressure on January, and
that's so true.
Yeah, we should be a bit more February focused, or maybe even March.
Yeah.
And why do we have to think of it as, January is where we put all our goals? Because what happens is, let's say you've got 12 goals in January, which is a me kind of thing to do. By December, you've got none because you've failed on them all. This thing I was reading was talking about flipping it around the other way. So trying to do one thing in January and one thing added to that in February and build from there. And actually, if I think about it like that, I have made some progress. So January, I was really trying to think about sleep, and I've definitely had a bit more sleep in January than the previous months because I track my sleep. And so I thought, right, just do that. And then in February, adding in another thing and so on and so forth.
That's a really good model.
Yeah, they're little, but then if I keep the sleep going and then I add in drinking more water, which was what February has been about, they're more doable than in January saying, I'm going to sleep more, drink more water, read more, meditate, run, be nicer, cook more, eat more vegetables. And then you're suddenly overwhelmed with that amount of change. So it doesn't matter what point in the year you're starting. You could say, right, first day of spring, what one thing am I going to do consistently for a month or so?
Good.
Get that embedded and add another. In fact, vitamins is going to be my next one.
Is that your March one?
I'm not very good at vitamins. Do you take anything like that? I knew you wouldn't. I knew it would be no. If Laura's in here, it might well be a yes. She's probably got a regime. No, I'm rubbish. I make the boys take vitamins. In the morning, I get them out for them and put them next to their glass of water.
That is very generous.
But
generous.
Why don't I get mine out at that time?
Well, what does that say? I'm going to air you out to your podcast listeners how the other day we were having lunch and you sorted lunch for your mum, lunch for your dad, hot drinks for everyone else. You sat down and then you were like, I haven't actually eaten anything.
No. And why can I not?
Yeah.
attached getting my own vitamins out with when I get my boys' vitamins out. It's almost like there is actually one reason I don't always eat breakfast at that time. And I can't take vitamins if I haven't eaten because they make me sick.
Sure.
So that could be why. But even so, I could do it late. I could do it at dinner time.
So they're out.
I could. There are lots of things I could do. So, well, ask me in a month, how am I getting on with my vitamins? Because that's my latest project. So, tiny habits, that's one thing. And I think it's encouraging people, if they feel like they want to make a change or a fresh start, that you can do that any day, right? Why do we have to wait for January? You can do it right now. Make that change.
Absolutely.
What are you going to change?
Gosh. Well,
I've put you on the spot there.
I know. I've just been enlightened to this new way of doing life, so I don't know. I actually do want to... I'm teaching myself the piano at the moment.
Oh, there's one right behind me.
Should I do a live?
You should do a little tinkle for us.
I want to be more consistent, and so I wonder if saying once a week, one evening a week, can I build in half an hour where I can just practice, and that's doable. Yeah, we could even do a little sing-song one of the days at work. We could come in here, I could play a bit, you could play a bit. At lunchtime. Perfect. I don't play my piano. Well, that should be April.
Shall I tell you a little story about the piano?
Okay.
I might not have told you this. I don't know whether people can see, but on the piano, well, you can't see because it's closed, but the piano actually says on it, Miller's.
Oh.
And it was my wedding present from my parents. Obviously, I wasn't a Miller.
That is a hefty gift.
No, but it was my piano. I've had that piano since I was 3. Oh. And I always had a Miller's piano, even though I was a Jennings.
Oh, wow.
So when I got married, what perfect gift?
That is perfect.
The Millers, it was always destined to be mine and to be here. My sister might be listening to this podcast and she'll be shouting as she hears it. It was my piano. It was hers and mine, but I'm younger than her, so obviously she couldn't take it with her. So I got to keep it. Anyway, that's nothing to do with anything. So coming back to change, I think if we are going to change or have a fresh start, we always have to review first. So questions there are just simply what went well and what didn't go so well. So if we're thinking about the last season, winter, what went well and what didn't go so well? And I'm thinking about that and thinking work-wise, what went well? We launched a podcast, done some exciting pieces of in-person work where I've done some really great speaking engagements. What didn't go so well, Zoe? Tech. We've had tears over tech, trying to fit too much in.
Yeah, biting too much off.
Yeah. On a personal level, I don't think that I've had a lot of muscle pain. And so like physical exercise has been poor, but improving. So that didn't go so well. And therefore then eating in winter doesn't always go so well for me.
That's true. Well, true for a lot of people.
True for a lot of people, and I'm one of those people. What didn't go so well at work? I think the main thing was the juggle, probably. Mm-hmm. Is there anything else you can think of that didn't go so well?
No, I think those are the main.
No, I think, ones. It's nothing major, more about how do we make tweaks so that we're not stacking it too much in. But again, that seems to be like the story of my life. So I think if you're listening to this and you're thinking about making a change, I think you need to look at the last period of time, reflect what went well, what didn't go so well, and what can you learn from that, because recognizing what hasn't gone so well is real impetus for change. And I keep reflecting on that and thinking, I want to make a change with the juggle. I've got to get frustrated enough to do something about it.
Sure.
Because we don't until it gets bad enough, do we? You have to hit a place where you're like, enough is enough. And I'd like to get there sooner rather than later. When it comes to making the change, we need to think about, this is really good, right? Chris Gilbo, who I think is brilliant. If you're listening to this podcast, check him out because his stuff's really good. But he said to when you're trying to make a change in your life, think about a change you've previously made, any change you've previously made. And I was thinking about that. Can you think of a change you've made in your life?
Recently?
Anytime.
Any
change. You got married. Yeah. Okay. So when you've made that change, the question to ask yourself when you think about life post the change, do you ever wish you'd made it later? And the answer is always no. Yeah. It's either sooner or it was right on time.
Yeah.
hardly ever does anyone say, oh, I wish I'd made that change, but I wish I'd done it later
in life.
We don't think like that.
No.
So it's a really good way of thinking about change, that although change is uncomfortable and doing something that's not what we normally do goes against the grain, we never wish we'd done it later. So if I start taking vitamins every day and getting really good at looking after my supplements, I'm not going to say to you in December, I really wish I'd started doing that in December. Because that would just be stupid.
Especially if it's going to make positive
impact. I know, especially if it's going to give me like 10% more energy and all the other things. Exactly. Gut health. We should get gut health into the podcast. It's all anyone ever talks about. So I thought that was a really good starting place. Actually, any change we want to make or any change we previously made, I would love somebody to think of something that they wish they'd done later rather than just when they did it, or they wish they'd done it sooner. And I would struggle to find, I can't think of an example of where you might positively want to make change and talk about it like that.
No,
I agree. So if we've reviewed and we've decided the change has got to be done, I think we've got to, as part of that kind of reflective process and making the change, there's a few principles that we can think about. One is, I think we need to manage our regrets, anything that we wish we'd done. That kind of fits with our regrets podcast that we've already done. But Daniel Kahneman did some research where they researched people who had lost money through an action that they took, or they'd lost money through an inaction that they took.
Wow.
And the principle was they thought people would have more regret around an action that they took that didn't work out. But do you know what? That wasn't what happened. People had more regret over things they didn't actually do than the things they did do that didn't work out.
Wow.
Which is really important to remember. Yeah. So that kind of fits with what we're talking about with regrets. But actually, a regret often is something that we are inactive to do rather than when we go for something and it doesn't work out.
That's so true.
And that goes to a little bit of what we were saying about maybe the definition of regret's a bit different towards regretting wishing you'd done something rather than something you did do that you wished you hadn't.
Yeah, I'm thinking about there's something in music. I sing and sometimes play the guitar as well. But there's something called the number system, which is a way of like calling chords and notes and whatnot. And I was meaning to learn the number system, but really was putting it off because I just thought it's going to take time and there was cost in doing that. But finally I was like, right, I'm just going to get myself together, learn it. And then I found that in songwriting, it made my life so much easier.
Really?
So it's then like choosing the cost of, do I want the cost of giving time and energy and effort into learning this, or the cost of getting into a writing session and struggling to be able to communicate because of that? And so, yeah, you're so right. There's always going to be cost, right?
There is. And that's a really good point, because actually something that a friend of mine, Fraser, who I've mentioned before, said to me, when we're thinking about making a change, there's a formula out there for what actually tips us over into making it. Because you know how sometimes we're like, why don't I just change? Why don't I just do the hard thing? Well, first of all, hard things are hard.
Yeah.
And secondly, things are hard anyway. So maybe we should just do the hard thing, because it's hard to stay put and it's hard to make change. Like if you feel that you are unhappy and you're maybe heavier than you'd like to be, well, that's hard. And it's also hard to lose weight. So why don't we do the hard thing? If you think it's hard to make the time to do creative stuff in your life, but it's also hard to not be using your creative personality. So it's hard either way. Yeah. So why don't we choose the hard that enables us to make progress? And I'm saying that knowing that that's much easier said than done. But actually, it's all hard. So we should choose the hard that actually gives us the better outcome and gets us closer to where we want to be. But the whole hard thing and thinking about cost, which is what you said, is really interesting, because it fits into this formula around how we make change in our life and how we actually make a change. And my friend Fraser, as I was saying, told me all about this. It's called the Beckard-Harris formula, okay, originally. So that's the posh name. But it's simply A plus B plus C has to be greater than D, right? So you need to know what A plus B plus C is. So A is you've got to be dissatisfied with the status quo. So that's one of the first things that's got to happen to make a change. You've got to feel dissatisfied enough to want to make the change in your life that you're looking for. So do you care enough? Are you bothered enough that you're not making time to play the piano? Do I care enough that I'm not taking vitamins? Am I bothered enough that I'm making the time to write or any other thing I want to make? Am I bothered enough that I really don't like my job? So there has to be enough dissatisfaction, which is often why people make progress in pain, right? Because there's got to be dissatisfaction. The B is you've got to have a vision for what it could look like. So as well as being dissatisfied, you've got to be able to imagine what a better life or a better thing could look like. So you've got to be able to see the fruits of your labour, or let's take it to the work example, dissatisfied enough with the current job that you have and a vision for what that other job could be. That's why loads of people come and work with me, because they've hit a point of dissatisfaction and the purpose pursuit helps them to get a bit of vision for what it could be instead. So you can't just be dissatisfied. To make a change, you've got to have a vision. And then C is you need to know what your next steps are. So that goes back to those tiny habits. What's the things that you are going to do in order to make that change? So A plus B plus C, okay, dissatisfaction, vision, and next steps, having an action plan, all have to be kind of greater in your mind than D. And D is the cost, the cost of change. Because we are just fundamentally resistant to change. We know it's going to cost us. If you're going to make a career change, you've got to be dissatisfied enough, have a clear enough idea of what you're going to do next, and begin to make a plan, even if that plan is 5 years long. But if you see or perceive the cost to still be too big, you won't do any of that stuff.
That's true.
You'll stay put. If you perceive the cost to be, this is too difficult, too costly, I'm going to have to do some more learning, I might have to take a pay reduction, all of those things, if that cost is still outweighing in your head the other things, that's why we don't change. And when we either realise the cost of staying put's more costly, or we realise the cost that we think change is going to be is maybe not as bad as we think, I think it's only then that we actually tip the needle towards actually changing.
That's really good.
Yeah, I think it's it's not my formula. I wish it was. But I think if you're listening to this and you're thinking, right, in spring, I am going to read more or whatever it is, make that shift at work, go for a different position, taking yourself through that process and actually really thinking about what the cost is, measuring it is a really good idea. And perhaps alongside that, measuring the cost of staying put. There's still cost. Going back to the earlier point, it's hard where you are. It's going to be hard to change. So choose your hard. Which hard are you going to pick?
Absolutely.
There used to be a thing that it was a sketch. I think it was to do with the Spanish Inquisition or some other horrible thing. Somebody's going to correct me when they listen to it. And it was a sketch where it said, "Hello, do you want the cake or death?" And it was this idea of, do you want cake or death? Oh, cake, please. Sorry, we're all out of cake. You've got to have the death. And it was just this silly cake or death choice around, if you're going to choose hard, I've made no sense at all, have I?
No, I'm
you're
following.
You're like, well, nobody's going to choose the death. I think I've completely messed that up. But we sometimes say that to each other. Sam and I will say cake or death, or I'll take the death, please. Nobody chooses death, they choose the cake. But it's death or death. You've got to choose what you've got to choose. People are going to listen to this and think Hannah's just become slightly unhinged.
Okay?
Or they've seen the sketch and they know what I mean. Regardless,
I'm with you.
It's choose your hard is what I'm trying to get at. It's hard to stay stuck. It's hard to make change. So which hard are you going to pick? That's my kind of message in this whole thing. And I'm literally saying this to myself as much as anybody. I'm desperate to do better in the morning. It seems to be the only time of day I can safeguard, for sure.
Yeah.
I'm realising this about myself. As much as I'd like to do the things that are for me later in the day, it's just not going to happen in my current phase of life. Not easily. So I've got to choose the hard of finding more time in that morning slot, if possible, because it's hard to stay put, or it's going to be hard to make that shift.
Yeah.
My nephew was telling me, one of my nephews, that he's done this thing where he's done a little bit of a contract with himself and he's signed it.
Wow.
Like he's found for him it's worked. He's quite a natural procrastinator. And he said he's made this agreement. Again, it's around his creative projects. He's made this like agreement with himself that he wants to stick, and he's literally signed it.
Wow.
So we have to find the stuff that helps us,
that
right?
Works for you, yeah.
And helps us make the change. So I think we've got to manage our regrets. We've got to manage the way things were. We've got to review how stuff was. We've got to recognise that actually, do you want the regret of action or the regret of inaction?
Yeah.
And then you start to think about, what am I dissatisfied about? What could a better life look like, or a better in this area look like? And what might my next step towards that be? I think there's one last thing I want to say, is that sometimes the kind of goals I'm talking about are unhelpful, like read more, drink more, take vitamins. A better thing to have is maybe an overarching goal, which is the purpose behind the action.
Yeah.
So if I talk about the sleep and the vitamins and the walking, they're all about being healthy for the long haul. And that's actually the objective and the vision.
Thread, yeah.
And I'm just picking a thing that gets me a step closer to that. So sometimes we obsess over the action or the goal, and maybe if you're listening to this and you're thinking about it, can you get past that and think about what is it you're trying to create for yourself? So if the career change is what you're looking for, is it because you have total inflexibility of time?
Yeah.
Is it because you are bored? And so then the goal is time freedom, or the goal is autonomy, or the goal is being challenged, and then the vessel behind that is the thing that you're then going to change.
I remember being in one of your coaching calls where you were saying sometimes always linking it to the wider thing is helpful. So like what you're saying, drink water so that I feel better during the day. And maybe not drinking water, but okay, going for a walk. People might think, oh, that it's cold outside, I don't want to, but then linking it to the wider thing can help you get into the mindset of, oh, actually that's going to be really good for me, and I'll make that step, make the change. That's right. I think that "so that" is really good language. I'm doing this so that, and I say it all the time to my boys in a way that makes them roll their eyes. I'm one of those really annoying mothers, but I'll say, make the choice that your future self will be happy with. It's true.
And I need to say that as much to myself, which of the choices will my future self be happy with?
Yeah.
And sometimes we have to pep talk ourselves, don't we? And have a word with ourselves, because we're actually, most of us, programmed for choosing easy.
Yeah.
There are some weird individuals out there that choose hard. Like one of my sons likes to run up hills. Who wants to do that by choice? He'd rather run up a hill than run on the flat.
Oh my gosh, that is
I'm
niche.
like, I don't want to run up any hills ever. If I'm going to run, let it be flat. That's kind of my choice. I am definitely the more average, programmed to take the route of least resistance. So if we're going to be, by nature, sometimes we have to reprogram ourselves to think, actually, we can do hard things. That's one of the principles of, like, if you listen to anything around stoicism, it's about doing a hard thing every day and reminding yourself you did that hard thing and you survived it. Absolutely. Whatever that hard thing is, the hard thing might be having a cold shower.
Well,
or taking a vitamin. And on that note, cake, death, hard things, easy things. Do the hard thing, measure the cost, and decide how costly is it to stay put and how costly is it to bring some change. And spring is for you and wants to help us bring about that change in our lives.